The California Product Stewardship Council is a coalition of local governments and associations across California. We began convening in spring of 2006 in response to the universal waste ban, which went into effect in February 2006. Our mission is ambitious and straightforward. As you can see, our mission is nothing short of entirely changing the waste management paradigm in the state to one that decreases the burden on local governments and ratepayers and increases accountability on the part of manufacturers. We're thinking big. I'd now like to take you through the reasons we're so committed to this mission. Let me tell you about Bill Worrell. He manages the waste management system for San Luis Obispo County. It's a relatively small county, population 250,000, and Bill's budget for the entire household hazardous waste management system is $300,000 a year. A recent California state regulation requires that local government assume responsibility for implementing and managing a new universal waste disposal ban. Mercury thermostats, rechargeable batteries, alkaline batteries, and electronics are now banned from disposal in the trash. Local jurisdictions must arrange for other disposal or recycling of these products. But the magnitude of this task is massive and expensive. Complying with this regulation would explode San Luis Obispo's household hazardous waste management budget. $4 million would be needed to manage U-waste products alone. The law amounts to a well-intended but unfunded mandate. Local governments simply do not have the capacity to comply with the new regulations, and the serious problem of hazardous U-waste products is left unsolved. Product waste is a real and significant problem that must be addressed in a sober way. But simply delegating responsibility to cities and counties is not only unrealistic, the California Product Stewardship Council suggests it is also inappropriate and counterproductive. To fully understand this issue, we have to start in the past and look at how our waste has changed. Solid waste only became a municipal responsibility 100 years ago in response to a sanitation crisis. Solid waste was much simpler then. So-called municipal solid waste consists of three kinds of waste: mineral waste, matter like coal ash and ceramics; food and yard waste, things that are grown; and product waste, things that are made or manufactured goods. I'll show you how the makeup of per capita waste managed by local government has shifted over time. When local governments assumed responsibility for solid waste a century ago, people threw out mostly coal ash that they used for heating and cooking. The rest was mostly food, with a small amount of simple manufactured products like paper and glass. 60 years later, the coal ash has gone from municipal waste systems, but it has been almost completely displaced by food scraps, yard trimmings, and product waste, things we buy, and their packaging. And by the year 2000, product waste made up 75% of per capita waste, and people are now throwing away more waste than they did 100 years ago. In fact, in just the last 40 years, what we throw out has changed significantly, from a fairly even mix of food and yard trimmings and product discards to a lopsided product-heavy mix. The mineral, food scraps, and yard trimmings waste streams have remained relatively flat, but product waste has skyrocketed, so the total has skyrocketed as well. One of the reasons for skyrocketing waste generation is that products are designed to be disposable. Things are not designed to last, but instead are designed to run out, be tossed away, and replaced, with no regard to the consequences to local communities, our environment, and public health. Hazardous products that local governments are responsible for keeping out of landfills in California are both toxic and disposable. Things like batteries, mercury switches, electronic equipment, and fluorescent lighting. Soon needles and other sharps will be banned in California. And there's momentum behind dealing with pharmaceuticals, so more and more products will be banned from the trash. Speaking of pharmaceuticals, here's a lighthearted look at a serious problem. A recent study by the U.S. Geological Survey found pharmaceuticals in 80% of the streams sampled. Half of the streams contain 7 or more of these chemicals. One example, and there are many, of designing products for disposal is cell phones. There are more than 1 billion cell phones in existence today. This is an illustration of the extraordinary number of cell phones thrown out in America. 426,000 cell phones are thrown out every day in the U.S., 52,000 per day in California alone. We have a law requiring cell phone recycling, but it's not enforced, so most phones are not handled responsibly. Without policies or programs to manage the disposal of these items, this is where they end up. Fluorescent lamps contain mercury, as do electronics. Batteries contain nickel and cadmium or corrosive acids. In the Bay Area alone, more than 13 million fluorescent bulbs like these are disposed of each year. One of the complicating factors of this problem is that it is multifaceted. It's a solid waste problem, a hazardous waste problem, a wastewater problem, a stormwater problem, all of which adds up to a public health problem. And this reality is bringing together experts and professionals from these areas to help solve it. The good news is that legislative bodies are trying to address this problem, both because of the volume of the waste and the makeup of these hazardous products. With the best of intentions, California's universal waste ban prohibits all of these residentially generated hazardous products from the trash. Disposal bans on treated lumber went into effect January 2007. Needles and other sharps are banned in September of 2008, and pharmaceuticals are expected to be banned soon. Bans can be instrumental in highlighting the environmental and public health dangers of putting toxic products into the landfill. That's the good news. But when you look closely at how these bans are constructed and the fact that the responsibility to ensure compliance is misplaced onto local governments where the capacity to enforce them is limited, you can see they have little chance for success. They amount to unfunded mandates, as in San Luis Obispo County. They place responsibility on governments who don't have the resources to respond. They are virtually unenforceable. They make taxpayers or ratepayers responsible. And they subsidize manufacturers. And these last 2 points are especially important. A compelling case can be made that government should play a key role in providing services that the market can't or perhaps shouldn't, such as roads and water. It's a much harder case to make that government should be collecting and disposing of privately manufactured products at the end of their useful life. This system does not send the appropriate economic signals to manufacturers to design durable, non-toxic products. In fact, precisely the opposite. Let's take a quick look at the impact of all of the waste diversion and recycling efforts on the part of local governments. Although the amount of waste diverted has certainly increased, nevertheless, we are still sending pretty much the same amount of waste to the landfill in 2007 that we sent in 1990, 40 million tons. That's because diversion is a downstream action that addresses end-of-life management. It does nothing to reduce the generation and consumption side of the equation, and it is that side of the equation that has exploded in recent years. This is just one illustration of how existing recycling efforts and disposal bans are not reducing total waste generation, which is the highest on the waste hierarchy. Reduce waste first, then reuse and recycle. We currently operate under 2 completely separate and disconnected systems. One of the systems is related to production and sales. This system is controlled by producers who make the design and marketing decisions that cause raw materials to be extracted and products to be manufactured, transported, and sold to the consumer. But then the job of the producer and retailer is over. Once the consumer is finished with the product, the other system is engaged, wherein local governments become financially responsible for collecting and managing the disposal of these private goods, many of which are toxic and disposable by design. These systems have little in common and do not communicate with each other. Local governments don't have any input into how toxic or durable the products are, and manufacturers don't have to design creative and safe ways to dispose of them at the end of their useful life. Local government's willingness to take responsibility for a private brand owner's products at the end of their useful life amounts to society's implied support for the manufacture of toxic and disposable products. If Dr. Phil were here, he'd say the governments have actually become enablers of our society's growing addiction to disposable products. Our willingness to do the cleanup work for manufacturers actually incentivizes the design of toxic and disposable products, thereby exacerbating our growing waste problem. There is a better way, and it's called producer responsibility. Producer responsibility means whoever designs, produces, sells, or uses a product takes responsibility for minimizing the product's environmental impact throughout all stages of the product's life cycle. And the party having the greatest ability to minimize impacts, the producer, has the most responsibility. Business can do a better and more cost-effective job than government at managing their own products. The distribution systems are already in place. Product recycling should be an extension of the product marketing system. It should mirror the production and distribution process in a kind of reverse retail process, and it should be managed through commercial arrangements, all as part of excellent customer service. This idea is taking hold across the world. Hauler associations are even coming to the EPR table as they realize that they have an important role to play in this new system. They don't necessarily have to haul to landfills, and they don't necessarily need to be paid by local governments. There is a better way. Here's one more way to visualize a producer responsibility system. The Council suggests that product discards be distinguished from biodegradable materials like yard trimmings and food scraps, and that product discards be managed by producers, while local governments are responsible for ensuring that non-product biodegradable materials are returned safely to the earth, either through public or private infrastructure. One of the oldest examples of producer responsibility take-back systems was the nickel soda companies used to pay to get their glass bottles back. The bottle deposit laws in 11 states are an extension of this system. In British Columbia, a province of 4.4 million people, the pharmaceutical industry pays the full cost of a program that allows customers to take unused drugs back to more than 800 pharmacies. The program budget for 2007 is $305,000. A voluntary industry finance program in the United States and Canada takes back rechargeable batteries and cell phones. The Rechargeable Battery Recycling Corporation is the right kind of program and a good start, but it lacks transparency and accountability, and laws requiring recycling of these items are not enforced. Consequently, only a small portion of discarded rechargeable batteries and cell phones are actually collected. The producer responsibility idea is beginning to enjoy widespread support. Some manufacturers are already implementing policies and programs that have some EPR components. Some retailers are also implementing EPR programs. Taxpayer groups support this idea because it relies on the market, not tax dollars, to solve the problem. And there is still a role for government. Laws are needed to provide manufacturers the level playing field they want. These programs need standards, transparency, and accountability to achieve desired results. And they need legislative mandates to be accountable and effective. So like with all issues, government should not do everything, but it should do something. Local government has a critical role to play in leading the transition to producer responsibility. The Take It Back network in Washington State is a good example of a program that got it right. This program, created by local governments in partnership with large and small retailers, charities, and green groups, demonstrates that retailers can provide take-back services that are much more convenient than the few locations local governments can provide. It has a broad coalition of support, which is key to implementing these programs. And by showing key stakeholders that electronics take-back can work, it was instrumental in the passage of the first full producer responsibility law for electronic waste in the U.S. in 2006. Both in Canada and here in the U.S., local governments are getting organized in product stewardship councils like ours and are pushing for a proactive producer responsibility approach. There are councils in British Columbia, in Washington State and Oregon, and our group here in California. There's also a movement in the Upper Midwest to organize a stewardship council. We are delighted to note that the California Integrated Waste Management Board became a real state and national leader in EPR by adopting Strategic Directive 5 in February 2007, which makes EPR a core value of the board. The directive goes even further by stating specifically that the board will 1. Seek statutory authority to foster cradle-to-cradle producer responsibility, and 2. Develop relationships with stakeholders that result in producer-financed and producer-managed systems for product discards. California is the first and only state in the U.S. to have adopted such a clear policy statement about EPR, and the Council fully intends to provide grassroots support for this state leadership. Our message seems to be resonating, as you'll see by the list of CPSC participants in the next slide. Here in California, participants of our organization come from all parts of the state and include 24 cities and counties and other governmental groups like stormwater management associations and the Municipal Utility District. We've recently been joined by an association of rural counties representing 22 rural counties across the state, the Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority of the Regional Council of Rural Counties. From this map, you can see that we've covered a substantial portion of the state. These are the 24 cities and counties that are actively participating in the council. And the stippled area shows the 22 member counties of the Environmental Services JPA. Our goal is to turn this whole map green. We hope you'll be a part of that effort. In addition to those that are participating in our organization, there are cities and counties that are moving forward with EPR resolutions, ordinances, plans, and policies. Such policies integrate EPR into local purchasing specifications and develop local take-back plans for problem products. Urging state lawmakers to develop statewide producer responsibility, legislation, and policies is also part of these policies. Cities like Oakland, Morgan Hill, and Fresno have passed EPR resolutions, as well as individual counties and coalitions of counties, like the 30 counties that make up the Regional Council of Rural Counties. We want you to join our effort and follow the lead of these areas as we address this challenge, and we ask you to consider taking these 3 action steps. The first is to join California Product Stewardship Council as a participant and help us speak with a unified voice here in California. There is power in numbers. The second is to add producer responsibility to whatever lobbying efforts you are pursuing in Sacramento. And third, we ask that you follow the lead set in San Francisco, Sonoma County, Fresno, San Bernardino County, and other jurisdictions that are passing local resolutions, ordinances, and implementation plans that are based on the producer responsibility approach and who are integrating producer responsibility into their purchasing contracts. We encourage you to use the model EPR plans and policies on our website as a way to jumpstart the process in your community. Please contact us if you have any questions or suggestions on how to move the EPR effort forward. Thank you for your time and attention and questions. I want to leave you with just a few thoughts. First, we have a problem that few people contest. Our waste has changed, and the way we manage it has to change as well. Despite diversion efforts, we're throwing away more and more product waste. Second, the reason we continue to throw away more and more products is at least in part because the early solutions to this challenge did not address the root cause of the problem, the manufacturing of products that are designed to be thrown away. Manufacturers do not have the incentives they need to reduce the waste problem they are causing because regulations have placed responsibility on local government. We have to turn that model around, and we need your help to do it. And the last thought is that we have to get this right soon. I've heard that the only thing worse than no solution is a flawed solution, because people think the problem is being addressed. Our current laws and bans did not get it right. We encourage you to join us to make sure we get it right this time. Thank you for your time, and I hope we can count on your support.